my friends, welcome or welcome back to my channel. This is a special one. I want to give you my top 10 of war novels. I really love the genre since I was like 13, 14. I grew up with a whole lot of war stories of the First World War and Second World War. My grandfather was an American soldier who came to Belgium, well, not Belgium, France, the north of France in 1917. He endured a lot. He won a couple of medals, I believe. And my last memory of my grandfather is when he was buried with honors, so, you know, with the flag and everything, and the gunshots, and yeah, that was really amazing. I heard a lot of stories because he was a tremendous good storyteller. He did a lot of crazy things. He helped a lot of people, and yeah, he did a lot of crazy things too. Now, anyway, Second World War, his house, so where my father now lives, my father was born in that house. In the first room of the house, the Germans made a sort of control commander station. And because you could see, back then there was an airstrip, and so they had a really good view from the front window. And but in the back, my grandfather ran an escape route. Oh yeah, and he hit a lot of people in the woods next to us. And there were mostly people like from Poland, and so there were Jews with him, but there were also a lot of intelligence people from Great Britain that he helped to escape back to England. He was never caught, by the way. Never. And my grandmother on my mother's side has one heck of a story. She was born in 1901, and so she was 14 at the time, and she was walking towards school, and a bomb dropped next to her, but only like that far away from her. It didn't detonate, but she took it home. A live, active bomb. She took it with her, and they kept it. And then after the war, they had it, I don't know, dismantled or something. And she kept the thing, the bomb, and it stood in the center of the living room on a little table. That's one of the visions that I still have from my grandmother. Now, all that aside, I read a lot about the First and the Second World War. I also did a lot of research in the First World War. So yeah, that's a bit why I love those books. Now, normally I read it, so there are some very excellent Dutch books about, well, Dutch-speaking Flemish books mostly, about the First World War, because the Netherlands didn't participate, they were neutral. But those books never were translated, so I can't show them. It's a bit silly if you can't read them. So I will forget about those, and I will talk about the ones that I have read. Now, when you see a list like the 10 best war novels, one of the first that they say is the Iliad, for instance, by Homer. I haven't read that book. I will read it next year, so it's a bit silly to talk about that book. Now, for the First World War, people always say, well, All Quiet on the Western Front, because of the movie that came out last year. But there's one that was written a lot earlier, also by a German soldier, about his experiences in the trenches and how he lost all his friends and how scared he was. And yeah, he was a young boy. So A Storm of Steel by Ernst Jünger. is a very raw account, a very painful account of the First World War from the viewpoint of a young boy who left home and enlisted and was immediately sent to the front and saw the most horrific things. Now, another book that I was thinking about is At Night All Blood is Black by David Diop. So a lot of, in the French army, as well as in the English army, the British army, there were a lot of African people that were brought over from Africa to fight in the trenches for something that they had no business with, actually. And this is the account of a young African or Senegalese soldier who was dumped in the trenches as cannon fodder, and he becomes mad, really, and he loses his best friend and he takes revenge. And it is really gripping and mesmerizing, but also shocking. But an excellent book, and David Diop is a really, really good writer. He's a Senegalese writer. What I did a lot of research around is the women in the First World War. They were, for the Germans, they were actually invisible. So my family lived in the occupied part of Belgium, and there was only just a little corner of Belgium that was still free. And there were the trenches, there was Passchendaele and everything. So, but the rest of the Belgians, they lived in occupied Germany. Well, Belgium. And what the Germans never thought about in the First World War is how important the women became. So the women were the spies. They did a lot of... especially the first year, they did a lot of work. They counted the trains, and they looked what was on the trains, the ones that were going to the front. They passed it on to the Netherlands, and then via the Netherlands it went to Great Britain. Then there was also a lot of soldiers that got stuck behind enemy lines, and for instance there's Edith Cavell, where I read a lot of texts around, and even a script. She helped around 250 English soldiers and other soldiers escape back to Great Britain via the Netherlands, but after a year she was caught and then executed. So a lot of women were very important, not only for intelligence, but also for smuggling, because they were all wearing long skirts. And I remember that my grandmother still had one of those skirts where they had pockets, and in those pockets they hid butter and stuff, all things that were luxurious, and they brought it to the city, and there they sold it for a lot of money. So yeah, those are the things. And a book that is about women in the First World War is The Alice Network by Kate Quinn. I'm sorry, this is a very sweeping but also a little bit romantic story of those women in espionage during the First World War. And then the First World War ended in 1818. The First World War ended in 1918, and in 1919 the Russian Civil War was full blown. So it started in 17, I think. Yeah, I think in 17, the Russian Civil War was in 1917. You can correct me in the comments down below, I'm sorry. But this is a story of the four soldiers. I have the Dutch version, but I really liked it, by Hubert Mignarelli. So it is 1919. It's the middle of the winter, and they are in the front line of Romania, and they are, because the winter is so harsh in those periods, they don't fight as much, so there's a lot of boredom. And this book really talks about the friendship and about the life just behind enemy line, just behind the front line, and how they deal with their free time. And it's a really, really, really beautiful book. It is tender, it is a beautiful ode to friendship, to sticking up for each other. I really enjoyed this book and I highly recommend it. Whilst the First World War was more of a family quarrel, to say it bluntly, so you had Tsar Nicholas, Wilhelm, King Albert in Belgium, you had, was it George V in England? They were all nephews, they were all cousins, they were all family, and they fought it out and got so many people killed. Now, the Second World War was more about image and, two alpha men that wanted to rule the world. The biggest example for Hitler was Benito Mussolini in Italy. He was his idol. He had those those troops with the black shirts and everything, and the marching, and he was very good at PR. And Adolf Hitler took it as an example, and they started the Nazis and the SS, and that was after the image of Benito Mussolini. Now, during the war, Benito Mussolini wasn't doing so well, and Hitler didn't really need him anymore, so he pushed him aside. But a very good trilogy about Benito Mussolini you must read is by Antonio Schirati, and Son of the Century. Really read it. There are already 3 books, and it's captivating. It's really, really well written, really well researched, and it's amazing. An amazing books. Now, one of the most important people in for the Nazis was Heydrich. Heydrich was Himmler's second man. We always say he was Himmler's brain. Heydrich was very cultivated, very intelligent, but also he had a huge ego. Let's keep it to that. And he was very important in the Eastern Front. So he was in Prague, I believe. Yeah, I think he was in Prague, Czechoslovakia. And he always rode around in convertible, sitting in the back. And Hitler told him, don't do that, it's dangerous. But he thought he was invincible. And then there were a couple of boys, young men, Czech kids who, killed him while he was sitting in his car. And this is the book about him, written by Laurent Binet, HhhH. This is my Dutch version, but it has the same title in English. It's a wonderful, really well written novel about how they did the whole thing and how they ended. It is a really, really good book. There's some scenes in there that I will never forget. Another book, but I have it somewhere. It is Unbroken by Hillenbrand. It's the story about a young man who was an athlete who competed at the Olympics in Berlin. And then the war started. He went to the South Pacific. His airplane went down, I think, or was it a boat? I can't remember. He survived in a boat for 6 weeks, and then nearly died, and then he was captured by the Japanese and was thrown in a camp, had to endure a really, really hard regime. But he survived, he pulled through. And it's a beautiful movie, but also a very, very good book. It's the story of Louis Zamperini, now I remember. That's the Pacific. I don't know much about the Pacific War because it was so far away. Anyway, in Africa, especially in the northern part of Africa, in Sahara and Morocco, and a lot of things were happening too. You had Rommel, and then you had the English forces, and well, it didn't go too well for the English forces, for the British forces, and a new regiment was started, and they called it the SAS. It was illegal. Actually, it wasn't official. It didn't have to follow the rules. They just sabotaged and did a lot of stuff that was completely whack. Absolute crazy. And this is, this is their account. This is the start of the SAS, Rogue Heroes by Ben Macintyre. It's madness, pure madness, but it's a great read. I highly recommend it. Wonderful book. Then, of course, during the Second World War, a lot of battles were fought underwater. And Das Boot by, what was his name? Buchheim, Lothar Günter Buchheim. Das Boot is amazing. It's also an amazing film, German film. Das Boot, also known as U96, U96. That was the number of the boat or the submarine. And this tells the extremely suffocating story of the crew on board, and the fear they must have endured during the whole campaign that they went through. It is an amazing story. It is really well written. It is really, it feels like somebody is pressing on your chest or something. It feels like extremely claustrophobic. Really good book, Das Boot, U96. Another great book about a crew that is up in the air is Bomber by Len Deighton, and this tells the story of 24 hours somewhere in 1943. And not only does it tell the story of the crew, but also the story of the small village that they are going to bomb. It is extremely captivating and absolutely a great read. Len Deighton, Bomber, the best book written for me ever about the First World War, but it's fiction, is this one, The Kindly Ones by Jonathan Litell. Jonathan Litell, he has a dual nationality. He's part French, part American. He wrote this first in French, Le Bienveillant, and then it came also out in English. This is the best book. This is so evil. Oh, man. This is about Max Auer. And Max Auer is telling us his memoirs, his past of his days as a Nazi, and Dr. Max Auer. And he tells it with so much sarcasm and you hate this man to the core, really do. This is the most evil man that exists in fiction, even worse than who was it in Blood Meridian? I can't remember it anymore. It doesn't matter. That he makes that one a choir boy. This is the most evil villain you will ever encounter. Not only because he's proud of all the horrible actions that he did, but he got away with it. And you know that from the beginning. But this is such a good book. This is an amazing, amazing, amazing book. He's in my top 10 ever. No matter what genre, this one is in my top 10. It is a big book, but I read it, I believe, in 2 days. It's almost 1,000 pages. Now, a couple of two books that I really want to mention that are a bit anti-war. Of course, there's Slaughterhouse-Five and Catch-22, but what most people forget to mention, although it's a very well-known book, it's Johnny's Got His Gun by Dalton Trumbo. That's a story that takes place just after the First World War. It's about a man who has no arms, no legs. I think he can't hear. I think he can't communicate even anymore. But the doctors keep him alive as a sort of test. And what you hear is his inner. What you read is the inner chatter of the man. Wonderful book, horrible but wonderful. Really, the best anti-war book that exists. Now, another book that I really want to mention that is not published in English, but I really want it published because it is wonderful. It is by the son of Thomas Mann. It is Klaus Mann, and the book is The Vulcano. It was published by Quirredo. Quirredo was a Dutch publishing house who, at the beginning of the war, specialized in, or just before the war, specialized in books that were forbidden by the Germans. And he wrote this book in 38, 39, I believe. And Klaus Mann, of course, is gay, and he escaped to Paris thinking that he would be safe from the Germans. And this is the account of the Germans who are there living, but they miss their Heimat, they miss Germany, and they are really upbeat, but it's a sort of forced happiness. And you can when you read this book, you realize, you think constantly, get out of there, because it's not safe. And some made the right decisions, and others took the wrong decisions. And it's a beautiful book, a really good book. The last one is a book that talks about the Falkland War in the 80s. The Falkland War was fought in the Falklands between Great Britain and Argentina. Argentina wanted their part back of their land, and Great Britain didn't want to hear of it, so they fought a war that was not that long, but it made a huge impression on 3 members of the para unit. And 3 Days in June is their account of how they experienced it. It's a very, very well documented book, and it's a must read if you are interested in the Falkland War. So yeah, that's it. That's my top 10. That is really not 10. I think it's a lot more. But anyway, it are the books that I love to read. Let me know in the comments what books you have discovered that you haven't heard about, and I hope you'll read them. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.